name is Honey. I'm almost 30 and I use Instagram to share pictures of my art. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Honey is a weird name, so please don't tell me what I already know. No, it's not a nickname. My parents are from California and they're like uber hippies, so go figure. As you can probably guess, I grew up in this overly loving, peacenik environment, which I'm sure sounds cool at first, but let's just say it left me wholly unprepared to deal with some of the darker things in life. Needless to say, I really struggled with my mental health in my mid to late 20s. I don't want to totally blame my parents for that. I think they did the best that they could, but they seriously didn't help with their just fill your heart with love nonsense, when what I needed was actual therapy and antidepressants. I got access to professional help in the end, but what really helped me keep it together in the meantime was my art. Before I started to suffer with depression and stuff, I used to paint and draw some pretty basic stuff. Landscapes, portraits, floral displays, stuff like that. But when I started to really suffer, I let out all my stress, anxiety, and sadness on the paper, and as weird as it sounds, that's when my art really started to flourish. It was probably the only silver lining to ever come out of my poor mental health. The more I posted my newer, darker art on Instagram, the more attention it got. My follower count shot up, I got offers for commissions, I actually managed to hook up with a t-shirt merch company and make a few sales that way too. Like I drew this pizza demon thing one time and that made me a few $100 from people wanting that thing on a t-shirt too. So when I say dark, I really do mean I started drawing some really messed up stuff. The pizza demon thing was probably the lightest-hearted thing I put out there in that time, and even then, people said it was super messed up. So as you might imagine, my new followers included some pretty messed up people. I don't say that to be like I'm complaining or mean or anything. I say that because one of them in particular made my life pretty difficult. So I get a direct message off of this guy who says he really loved my work and wanted a piece commissioned. Of course I say yes. So he follows up by asking what my rates are. I had no idea what I was doing in terms of dollar amounts at that time, so when I quoted him like $80 for a picture, he started explaining that I needed to value my art more, how my work was just as valuable as any other, and how I should be charging a whole bunch more for my art. I had no idea what to up my amount to, so I kind of threw out a few ballpark figures before the guy makes my jaw hit the floor when he offers me a straight $1,000 for an A3 size picture of whatever I wanted to draw or paint. I couldn't believe it. $1,000 for a picture? Which was more money than I'd ever made in my whole life. I got to work straight away, and within a week I'd poured my heart and soul out onto paper and sent it off and got my money via PayPal. Having that kind of affirmation actually lifted my mood to the highest it had been in months. I felt valued, like I could contribute something to the world. I was still dealing with my demons, but when I learned that I could actually profit from them, that I could make use of something that plagued me, it was a great feeling. I stayed in touch with the guy. I'd never been so grateful to anyone in my life until that point, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't think I'd be able to get more money out of him if he wanted something else commissioning. We used to talk back and forth a fair bit, and he shared that he too was an artist. I asked him what kind of artist he was, and he told me that he worked in some very unusual mediums. Naturally, this only got me all the more curious, as I got super dark with my art too, but he seemed pretty timid to talk about it. I get that people can be shy about showing off their artwork. I was pretty shy too at one point, but this guy needed some serious coaxing in order to show me anything. When he finally agreed to show me anything, he told me that he'd do it via one of those self-destructing messages that Insta now does. I didn't question anything. Like I knew he'd send one of those self-destructing pictures, maybe so he could protect his intellectual property or something. I was a little confused as to why he didn't seem to trust me, but hey, I pretty much adored this guy, so like I said, I didn't ask too many questions. I waited patiently for him to send me a picture of some of his work. It took a minute or two, but he sends me this 3-second self-destructing picture that I was honestly super excited to see by that point. But when I actually saw what it was, even if it was for a real brief time, I really, really wish I hadn't. It looked like a goat's head in a jar of some kind, and the fluid it was floating in looked sort of greenish-black, and I'm pretty sure it was formaldehyde. But it wasn't just that. The guy had opted to make a few little additions to the goat head, additions that I couldn't all catch because of how quick the picture flashed before my eyes, but the ones that I saw were horrible. It looked like he'd carved the lips away so that all the creature's teeth were showing, and on each one was carved or written a little symbol. I'm also pretty sure he either chemically changed the creature's eyes or replaced them entirely with a kind of metal or semi-precious stone. They had this weird glint to them. Like I said, there wasn't enough time for me to drink the whole thing in, but there was plenty more about the creature's head that had been messed with. It wasn't the details which really got to me. It was the idea that the corpse of an animal had been so horribly disrespected just so he could try to make some kind of art out of it. I had questions, a lot of questions, but the first thing I had to ask him was if it was really real or just some kind of mock-up of a skull. He told me it was real, very real, and that he'd gotten hold of a goat's head from a butcher, preserved it, and then basically surgically edited the thing over time, mostly using dental tools, apparently for the sake of precision. I personally thought the whole thing was a disgrace. I'm vegan, and I try to stay as ethical as possible, but at the same time, I didn't want to go imposing my own worldview on the guy, especially since I liked him so much. I also didn't want to offend him, so I told him his work was interesting and jaw-dropping, then asked if he worked with ink and paper or any variation on that. He told me no, that he only worked with skulls, how they were the capsule that held all the hopes and dreams and fears and needs of the once-living creature they belonged to, and that working with them was kind of sacred. I didn't really know what to say to that. He was right in a way. He sounded absolutely crazy for saying it out loud, but I couldn't entirely refute his point. It was like talking to some kind of insane genius almost. Not long after, he asked me if he thought he was cruel to work in such a medium. I told him people might find his work provocative, maybe even objectionable, but that it was fascinating nevertheless. Then he asked if I wanted to see more. Unlike the first time, there was no doubt in me that I most definitely did not want to see any more of this guy's work, but like I said before, I also really didn't want to offend him. So what could I do? It took me much longer to reply to his message that time, but in the end I told him sure, and he replied saying that he'd use another self-destructing message. Again, I waited a minute or two for the message to come through, and when it did, I opened up the message thread and tapped the little reveal message thing with some reluctance. The first time around, for that goat heads thing, I at least had some degree of curiosity, but at that time, I was just plain horrified by what I saw. It was a monkey's head, or at least it looked like it was some kind of primate, and if I thought the goat's head had received some disturbing additions, this latest one turned out to be 1,000 times worse. It was so bad I only caught the briefest glimpse of it and just had to look away and lock my phone screen to get it away from me. I was a little more confrontational with him after that, telling him that one was considerably more disturbing than the first, and I thought it was maybe a little too sensitive to see any more of his work. He asked why, and I broke it to him that I've been vegan for a few years, that I was a real animal lover, and although I could stomach the goat thing's head, I really couldn't handle the monkey head as it looked far too human to me. That's when he replies to me all like, it's interesting you should say that, and goes on to explain that it's his dream to work with a human skull, how he's put up a few ads on 4chan and stuff asking if anyone would be willing to donate their head should they die, but hadn't gotten any replies. Then he told me that he was getting really impatient, and that he was worried he wouldn't get a chance to realize his dream. The whole exchange had reached peak creepiness by that point, as you can imagine, and it was fast getting to the point when I was reaching for that block option, as I just didn't feel safe talking to him anymore. So by the time he actually messaged me another self-destructing message asking if I'd be willing to help him get hold of a human head, I just noped out of there and stopped replying to him. Like, I'm not sure he was actually asking me to, kill anyone with him or for him, but just the idea of going about procuring an actual human head? God, no. But I couldn't bring myself to block him. Like, he was a potential source of sales after all, and I could make a lot of money from the guy if I kept him interested in my work. I try not to think about it, but I get these really bad feelings from time to time. Like, what if he catches on to the fact that I just ignore him? And what if he decides that my head is the one he'd like to use to complete his magnum opus? I try very careful with what I post now, making sure it's only ever pictures of my art, and that the handful of landscape photos I'd posted on my profile had been deleted, just so whoever it is can't get an idea of where I live. Because if they do work out where I'm at, there's just no way I'd be able to go around feeling safe, not with someone whose ambition is to work with severed human heads, knowing where I lay mine at night. Alexis Sharkey was born in Houston, Texas in the year 1994 to her father, Mike Robinault, and her mother, Stacy. After graduating high school, Alexis initially studied biology education at a university in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but after gaining her diploma, she seemed to be in no rush to get a teaching job and found work at a premium hair and skincare company named Monat. She was still working for Monat when she began to gain a great number of followers on the photography-based social media app, Instagram. A combination of her natural beauty and her champagne lifestyle had users hooked. She and her husband, a wealthy West Texas consultant who was 26 years her senior, were accustomed to vacationing a lot, and Alexis wasted no opportunity to document her travels, sharing pictures with her followers on a daily basis. Not to mention sharing images of the couple's extravagant life around Houston, the place that they've made their home. Her posts would be seen, liked, and shared by tens of thousands of people, and by December of 2020, Alexis had over 69,000 followers. Now, as you may know, Instagram users with large amounts of followers are often contacted by private companies and offered large amounts of money in exchange for advertising their products, and Alexis was no different. Within a relatively short period of time, whilst still working full-time selling products for Monat, which has since been accused of being nothing more than a multi-level marketing company, Alexis was getting sponsorship deals which made her income swell to even higher levels than her consultant husband. But all was not well in the Sharkey home. A close friend of Alexis confessed that she had recently confided in her that she was filing for a divorce. Some had always doubted their relationship given that Tom was considerably older than her, and aside from an intense attraction, the couple seemed to have very little in common. Yet for some reason, Alexis didn't move out of the apartment they shared, even though she and Tom were apparently separated. However, she did see an opportunity to get a breakaway from Tom, as Thanksgiving weekend gave her the chance to stay over at a friend's place for the celebrations. She told her soon-to-be ex-husband that she would be back by the weekend, but on the Saturday following Thanksgiving, Alexis's mother, Stacy, received a call from Tom saying that Alexis was missing, and that he hadn't heard from her since Friday. A few days later, on November 28th, Alexis's mother posted to the social media site Facebook, stating that her daughter hadn't been heard from in over 24 hours, adding that police were involved and that Alexis had last been seen in the Houston area. This was especially concerning for Stacy, as she hadn't seen her daughter since the previous Christmas due to travel restrictions caused by the pandemic. Alexis had planned to return home to her parents back in Pennsylvania for Thanksgiving, but as the number of cases continued to rise all over the United States, the family decided it was much safer for Alexis to stay in Texas. But that very same morning that Stacy posted her plea on Facebook, a sanitation worker employed by the city of Houston saw something unusual lying on the side of the road. At first, he simply believed it was some kind of mannequin, due to the lack of clothes and the stiff positioning of the thing's limbs. But the worker's supervisor, a man named John Richardson, later said that the employee had sounded terrified when he called him, saying he'd noticed the apparent mannequin looked a little too real upon closer inspection, and that he suspected the situation to be far worse. John drove down to where the supposed mannequin was lying at the side of the road, then rushed to call 911 when he saw that it was no mannequin at all. That it was in fact a lifeless human body. The moment of realization traumatized him, and he later told a local radio station that the sight of the body had been playing in his head every day since he discovered it. 2 days later, on November 30th, Houston Police Department held a press conference in which they announced that they had identified the body as belonging to none other than Alexis Sharkey. Her soon-to-be ex-husband got a call from a local coroner's office, asking him to drive over to identify the body of a potential loved one. He knew immediately that it was going to be Alexis, but somehow found the strength to head on over, where he found her lying on a mortician's table, dead but with no obvious signs of injury. Yet to his horror, after the news of Alexis's death began to circulate in the news, he began to hear rumors that it was his maltreatment of her that had been the cause of her death. Anonymous accounts from people claiming to be friends of Alexis had told a number of online news publications that the separation from her husband had caused a huge amount of tension in their home, a tension that had soured into hatred. These anonymous friends claimed that Alexis herself had told them that some intense arguments had descended into violence more than once, and that her husband had been putting his hands on her. Suddenly, Tom Sharkey found himself bathed in the media spotlight, and for entirely negative reasons. In what became a lightning-quick trial by media, one which was fueled by social media speculation, tens of thousands of furious people assumed that it was Tom that was the murderer, and he began to receive a slew of death threats. It certainly didn't help that initially Tom had refused to comment on his wife's death, but as the threats against him became more and more tangible, he reached out to give a statement to a local ABC affiliate. "She understood me. I understood her. We didn't fight when she left. I just told her she shouldn't drive under the influence," he said, overtly implying that Alexis had been drunk the night that she left her friend's Thanksgiving celebrations. He also seemed to insist that there was no trouble in their marriage, and that they weren't filing for divorce at all. This was something that was backed up by Alexis's mother, who said her daughter would have told her if she was suffering marital problems. When the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences conducted an autopsy on Alexis's body, they told reporters that they couldn't rule out the possibility of foul play. This only cemented her mother's suspicions that she met a violent end. "I believe solely that she was murdered because of the manner in which her body was left," Stacy said. "It just drives deep into the soul that something very malicious happened here, and I want to get to the bottom of it." Friends said she confided in them on a recent trip to Mexico that she feared for her life, although she apparently did not say why she held such suspicions. But if this was the case, just who exactly killed Alexis? Police seem to have pretty much ruled out the idea that she was murdered by her husband, since he was quick to volunteer his cooperation with them in the aftermath of her death, and has since stated that they believe it to be only a matter of time before arrests are made. So perhaps Alexis's murder was related to her career selling beauty products of Monat. Not only has Monat been accused of utilizing the techniques of outlawed, multi-level marketing companies, but the quality of its products has also come into question. In the year before Alexis's death, Monat was allegedly investigated by Florida's Attorney General after hundreds of claims that its products caused a host of hair and skin issues. The company was permanently barred from using false or misleading statements in its marketing and sales of its beauty products, and faced a $1 million fine on top of class action lawsuits from those that, after using the products, claim they experience hair loss, balding, and itching. Alexis was a prolific seller of Monat's products, once receiving a check for $10,000 as the winner of a company sales competition. That would certainly make for a lot of women who might blame her for essentially disfiguring them. There's also a decent chance that since Monat's MLM tactics would leave a lot of people out of pocket, that somewhere down the line Alexis had screwed one of her underlings out of a great deal of cash, perhaps just before the news of Monat's subpar products broke in the media, perhaps leaving a person totally unable to shift a hefty amount of stock they'd purchased. This would doubtless leave a person angry, vengeful, maybe even murderous. And besides, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. If this is indeed the case, and Alexis's death is intrinsically linked to her Monat sales, then it seems that her status as an Instagram influencer actually led to her murder. The influence she exerted over those that followed her no doubt led to increased sales, thus increasing the potential pool of victims for Monet's frankly dangerous products. It's very possible that without Instagram, she may not have made the sale to that one person unhinged enough to seek revenge when their skin began to blister, or their hair began to fall out, or their scalp began to itch unbearably. It seems we'll soon find out who's responsible for Alexis's death. But if it is related to social media, it would be very ironic that a medium that has brought opportunity and new beginnings to so many brought one young woman to her end. The 24-year-old Russian Ekaterina Karaglonova had a life that many of us can only dream of having. She was young, beautiful, intelligent, and highly educated. Practicing medicine as a dermatologist after graduating from the Pirogov Medical University, she also held a residency at a prestigious medical school in Russia's capital, Moscow. And to top it all off, she had recently finished second place in a Moscow beauty pageant. Ekaterina was also a prominent social media personality in her native Russia, regularly sharing images of herself with hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers. Known by the handle @Katie_loves_life, she was known to write a blog detailing her luxurious jaunts around Europe, where she posed in locations such as Italy, Austria, and Spain. In her last Instagram photo shows her lounging poolside in Greece, detailing her love for international travel. It was very helpful for a few days to escape from heavy rains and cold to the Ionian Sea. She also captioned the snap of herself holding a glass of wine by a pool. Now I prefer to travel very often, but briefly, study and work do not let go. But the impressions of such short trips remain the most vivid. But one of her close friends, Marina Nikotina, began to notice that all was not well with her seemingly perfect life. She claimed to have observed a drastic change in Ekaterina's behavior during the summer of 2019, and when questioned on it, the well-traveled young doctor confessed that she had made a rather dangerous enemy and that someone is interested in my private life in the worst possible way. Then, in July of 2019, Ekaterina's family contacted the Moscow police, concerned with the fact that they had not heard from her in several days. Friends remarked that she had recently started a new relationship and had been planning a trip to the Netherlands to mark her birthday on July 30th. Most other people might have been busy with travel arrangements or might simply have been too occupied with their actual vacation to get in touch. But as we know, Ekaterina posted to her Instagram account almost religiously, and the fact that she hadn't done so for several days was the thing that alarmed her family the most. Deeply worried for her well-being, Ekaterina's family contacted her landlord, who, after some convincing, allowed them to access her apartment. There they found no sign of anything amiss. Her belongings seemed to be all in order, and there was no obvious signs of violence. But in the hallway was a heavy-looking suitcase, stuffed with something far more than just expensive clothes. Her family were horrified at what they found when they opened it, because what fell out in front of them was Ekaterina's decomposing corpse. She had been dead for almost a week, with a large slash across her throat and several other devastating stab wounds to her chest and abdomen. Upon examining the crime scene, police were unable to locate any obvious murder weapon, and there were no signs that there had been a break-in or any kind of serious struggle. Naturally, police checked her Instagram account for any clues that might point them in the direction of why she was killed. They saw that Ekaterina had alluded to a potential romance on her Instagram account, sharing photos of bouquets with notes attached to them. "Another surprise from Mr. X," she captioned the latest photo, adding, "For several weeks now I have been receiving bouquets and little notes from a secret admirer. I wonder who it could be." It was then speculated that such a public display of romantic interest could have angered a former lover, perhaps someone that couldn't bear to see the young doctor in a new relationship. Police then discovered CCTV footage had captured an ex-boyfriend of Ekaterina's who seemed to have paid her apartment a visit in the few days before contacting her became impossible. Ekaterina had only broken up with 32-year-old Maxim Geryeva a few weeks prior, and she had confided in friends that he had not taken it very well at all, and that he was a wolf. The man enters the Moscow apartment block wearing a baseball cap, apparently to cover his face from CCTV cameras. He is then seen leaving the apartment around 4 hours later, wearing a completely different outfit, which police speculated was because the one he'd entered wearing was now covered in blood. Police soon caught up with Maxim, who told police that the breakup had been hard on him, with Ekaterina repeatedly insulting and humiliating him, despite the fact that he had given her a sizable amount of money in the course of their relationship. Maxim said that she had told him he was ugly and that even a plastic surgeon could not help him. Before they parted, Ekaterina allegedly told him that it would have taken a year before he could save up enough money for them to meet again. This had given rise to theories that the young doctor had taken to resorting to a kind of selling of herself in order to fuel her extravagant lifestyle, charging men exorbitant amounts of money to go on dates with her. It was then that Maxim confessed that he could not stand the kind of treatment and had snapped. He then confessed that he stabbed Ekaterina in the neck and chest area with a knife at least 5 times, saying he regretted what happened and promised to cooperate with the investigation. She half turned and I struck her in the neck, he says in a recorded confession to Moscow police. She tried to escape to the bathroom and lock the door. I pulled her out of the bathroom. Her blood was dripping down her body. Then in the corridor she started screaming. I covered her mouth and stabbed her again in her chest with the knife. She then ran to the living room and started fighting me, but I was in a state that I didn't feel any pain. During the fight she fell down and I struck her twice again in the neck. Then she had convulsions and died. Maxim was taken to trial for the murder, and he apparently held his face in his hands in court because he looked bad. Such was the depth of his own vanity. Character witnesses alluded to calling him Ken, a reference to the Barbie doll because he was so obsessed with plastic surgery and his overall appearance. Maxim insisted the murder was not premeditated and told the courtroom it was a spur-of-the-moment thing, something that came about as a result of the rage that he was feeling that Ekaterina had so deeply insulted him and his looks. I want to apologize to Katya's parents. I am very sorry, he told the Instagram influencer's family before he was taken to a prison outside of Moscow. It seems that the world of Instagram influencers, as well as those who are attracted to its veneer of perfection, are just as prone to becoming victims of its vapid plastic culture as we are. Here was an accomplished young woman who apparently could not bear to be without the trappings of luxury that she evidently felt she was entitled to, who, as a result, involved herself with a man who she believed was so beneath her that she could verbally abuse and shame him publicly with no repercussions. In no way did Ekaterina deserve to die for what she did, but in delving into the superficial lifestyle of an Instagram influencer, what's clear is that she opened up a kind of Pandora's box that seems to have set her on the path to ruin. When 20-year-old Sinead McNamara from New South Wales, Australia, received a job offer to work aboard the super yacht known as the Mayan Queen 4, she saw it as the opportunity of a lifetime. So much so that the Australian part-time model sold almost every single one of her belongings to be able to afford a plane ticket to Europe. She was offered the job partly because she had experience working on similar vessels, but the $190 million luxury boat was by far the most extravagant she'd ever had the opportunity to sail on. It was owned by Mexico's second richest man, billionaire Alberto Bayeres, and it was his home on the high seas as he traveled around Europe, living a life of pure luxury. In August of 2018, the Mayan Queen was sailing around the plethora of Greek islands in the Aegean Sea, and Sinead took full advantage of the gorgeous scenery, amassing around 20,000 followers on her Instagram account. Sinead posted plenty of pictures of herself too, and it's plain to see why the young lady was able to gain work as a part-time model. Not to mention how it doesn't take a genius to work out why photographs of a beautiful young blonde surrounded by beautiful Greek vistas attracted so many visitors to her page. But despite presenting an image of a perfect carefree existence, it became obvious to some that the life Sinead was living was far from flawless. At one point, the young woman called her mother back in Australia to complain that she had been involved in an intense argument with another crew member working aboard the Mayan Queen, and that she seemed scared for her safety. The very next day, a passing boat spotted the Australian model hanging from the back of the yacht, tangled up in a series of thick ropes. The crew of the Mayan Queen was alerted, and the captain of the boat, who asked not to be named, said he discovered Sinead's body at around 1:45 a.m. and began screaming for help. Doctors and police tried for around half an hour to revive her, but when she began to slip into a coma, she was rushed to an Athens hospital, but she sadly died in the helicopter that was flying her to the mainland. The man that inspected her body, Greek coroner Ilias Bogiokis, ruled that because of the circumstances in which she died, that he initially speculated that Sinead's death was actually her ending it herself. Since no stimulant drugs such as cocaine or sedatives such as cannabis or heroin had been found after the toxicology analysis, it means that the girl was not under the influence of such substances, he said. She had mental clarity and that she was most likely facing social problems and found herself at a psychological impasse. However, we don't know if someone brought her into this situation, if there was a moral instigator. The coroner also made it clear that questions still remained about the case, and would need to know much more about the events which led up to her hanging to make a clear, definitive judgment on how and why Sinead died. What's horrifying to hear, though, is that Sinead's body was in such a state that the coroner advised her family against viewing her body, even though this is standard practice to identify a person's remains. What was so messed up about her corpse that Greek authorities might forgo such a crucial part of the identification process? After an initial investigation by the Greek Coast Guard, the Mayan Queen 4 was then allowed to leave Kefalonia after interviews with the yacht's crew. The Mayan Queen 4 is equipped with CCTV surveillance cameras, and footage of the incident was seized by Greek authorities. Footage reportedly showed Sinead moments before her body was found, though the video was not made public, and for some reason it wasn't made available to the coroner either. The footage apparently showed Sinead in a very high spirits before her body was found hanging from the back of the boat, that she was dancing on tables and downing cocktails, hardly the frame of mind someone who is about to take their own life. If this is the case, our attention is then drawn to the argument with the other crew members, the same one she complained to her mother about, in which she confessed to being scared. Was Sinead's murder covered up by somebody who co-opted the Greek authorities into helping them sweep the events that preceded her killing under the rug? It's not entirely out of the question that Alberto Balearis, who is worth around $10 billion, would have the financial means to bribe government officials in a country so strapped for cash as Greece. Perhaps even more terrifying than the concept of some murderous conspiracy is the casual indifference with which her death was treated by people online. You live for attention, now you've got it, while another added, unfortunately the steep price you pay with lifestyles like this. But some have insisted there is plenty of evidence to suggest that her death was indeed her taking her own life. In a cryptic Instagram post written just 2 weeks before she died, Sinead wrote, "My head is all over the shop today," along with emojis of a volcano, a tornado, and a needle with blood dripping from it. There was also many who asserted that Sinead had ended a tumultuous romantic relationship a short time before her death, and that this may have contributed to feelings of depression or self-destruction. Her death also occurred on what was reported to be her last day as a crew member on the yacht, raising the question that perhaps she was so depressed to be leaving the lap of luxury, maybe even being forced to return to Australia because there was no more luxury yacht jobs available to her, that she opted to take her own life instead of biting the bullet and return to a life more ordinary, perhaps. And perhaps this is the most terrifying thing of all. That human beings are capable of reaching such height that we're simply unwilling to go on living if we can't continue to live in the way we've become accustomed to. That there's a possibility that at just 20 years old, Sinead had felt she'd peaked, and that everything else to follow in her life would pale in comparison to the time that she spent on the Mayan Queen. So instead of continuing her life with her days on the yacht becoming a happy, albeit distant memory, Sinead may have chosen to end her life in order to, as the saying goes, die young and leave a good-looking corpse. Jocelyn Cano was born on March 14, 1990 in Anaheim, California, before being raised near Lake Elsinore. Jocelyn first started modeling for local magazines at the age of just 17 years old, but gained the majority of her fame when she was featured on the cover of Lowrider magazine. Jocelyn also featured in World Star Hip Hop's Valentine's Day special video in Gerardo Ortiz's music video for his single Y Me Besa, as well as a number of other magazines and music videos. This fame led Jocelyn to launch her own swimwear brand, using her popularity on Instagram to sell her products to her whopping 13 million followers. Her Instagram is very similar to what you might expect from a so-called influencer, a collection of semi-naked pictures of herself, complete with several cataloging her extensive travels around the United States and Latin America, in a private jet no less, attending various modeling events in New York and Los Angeles. She was also famous for her rather rotund posterior, giving rise to her nickname of the Mexican Kim Kardashian. But Jocelyn apparently had the brains to complement her beauty, with her LinkedIn profile stating that she had studied microbiology at San Diego State University. She had smarts and good looks, with conservative estimates of her income suggesting she was making upwards of $100,000 from various sponsorships and swimwear sales. But for Jocelyn, it was simply not enough. So in December of 2020, Jocelyn booked herself an appointment with a plastic surgeon down in Colombia to undergo what has been referred to as a Brazilian butt lift. During so-called Brazilian butt lift procedures, fat is taken from various parts of the body and essentially molded into the buttocks to give them the appearance of being larger. The procedure has grown increasingly popular in the United States, fast becoming the most popular type of plastic surgery, according to 2015 statistics from the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. The rate of buttock lifts procedures rose over 200% from 2000 to 2015, with the total number of surgeries rising from 1,356 to 4,767 procedures over the course of that time. Yet, injecting fat into the buttocks can lead to severe problems if done improperly, including fat embolism, a process in which fat enters the bloodstream and blocks a blood vessel. Jocelyn's butt lift was due to take place in early December, but around that same time, news of her tragic death seemed to emerge. The cause of death has not been confirmed by her family, but Instagram influencer Lyra Mercer was apparently privy to the reasons behind her demise, and tweeting out on December 7th, "OMG, Jocelyn Cano died in Colombia getting surgery. That's wild." A 3-hour live stream of what is believed to be her funeral was shown on YouTube, which saw loved ones paying their respects to the young woman in a casket beside a large picture of her. Attendance was small and intimate, mainly due to the pandemic, but watching the live stream, we can see that Jocelyn's family was absolutely devastated by the news of her death, and that she is survived by 2 young children. The estimated death rate for Brazilian butt lifts is 1 in 3,000, according to PlasticSurgery.com, and it seems likely that Jocelyn's death was a result of complications following the surgery, becoming one of the unlucky few unable to survive such a procedure. Others wonder why representatives for Cano's brand have not confirmed the news, with one follower complaining that, considering the brand is hers, at least it carries her name, y'all should make a statement. I mean, she had over 12 million followers after all. The lack of confirmation has only fueled the rumors that Jocelyn did indeed die as a result of the Brazilian butt lift procedure, and that those now in charge of her company feel that the way in which she died might damage her brand. After all, they too are profiting from the sense of vanity that has risen as a result of superficial Instagram influencer culture. Last year, an online news publication reported on a shocking rise in black market butt lifts, inspired in part by so-called Snapchat dysmorphia, the condition of being out of touch with one's own physique as a result of constant exposure to highly edited or modified bodies on social media. It's been widely reported that varieties of beauty-based social media have been extremely damaging to female mental health, putting unrealistic expectations on them to look or live in a particular way. But it seems that the same is true for their physical health too, with surgical shortcuts to certain body types having literally killed a handful of young women over the past few years. I think we can all agree that it is frankly terrifying that such pressures can be felt so deeply by women that they would choose to risk their lives to attain a certain societal standard of beauty. And that smart, successful people can be so heavily affected by what they see online that they opt for what are obviously dangerous surgical procedures. Jocelyn Cano didn't have to die, that much is clear. But the question is how many other young women will have to lose their lives before we learn to love what we're born with naturally, instead of pining after some unattainable standard, and how much blood is on our hands for allowing such a standard to exist in the first place. So back when all this Islamic State stuff was kicking off in Iraq and Syria, I remember a mate of mine sharing an Instagram account with me that was run by this group called the Peshmerga. They were like this militia made up of Kurdish fighters, ethnically distinct from Arabs but still Muslims. In spite of this, they were being prosecuted by those ISIS guys for some reason, so they were basically at war with them. They used to post all these combat videos, as well as pictures of themselves with captured ISIS equipment, weapons, ammunitions, vehicles, all sorts of stuff. They posted some pretty gnarly stuff, so I followed the account, and naturally their stuff would pop up in my timeline every so often when I was scrolling. So this one day, I see a picture of them with someone I figured was a captured ISIS guy. He was all bloody and looking pretty sorry for himself, but the caption of the photo was in Kurdish, so obviously I couldn't tell what it all said. Thank God for Google Translate, because although the translation wasn't perfect, they did actually have a Kurdish option, so I could get an idea of what it said. Some of the words must have either been spelled wrong or they were using Kurdish slang, because some of the words just wouldn't compute, but like I said, I did get an idea of what the captions to the photo said, and as much as those ISIS dudes were or are scumbags, what I read was highly disturbing. I can't remember what the post said verbatim, but the words that did get translated were stuff like vote, mercy, kill, and then like a number of hours. It didn't take a genius to work out what those Peshmerga guys were proposing. They wanted their Insta followers to decide if that captured prisoner was to live or die. And then, as you can imagine, pretty much all the replies were just one-word replies that could be translated into yes, kill, do it, and that sort of thing. Only a handful pleaded with them not to do it, giving reasons like, "You be no worse than they are. We're not barbarians," and other variations on that theme. I remember being really shocked because the time period they gave was only like 2 or 3 hours, and even though the post had only been up for like a half hour, there were literally hundreds of comments all telling them to kill the guy. I remember sharing the post with a mate of mine who'd shown me the account in the first place. We spent hours going back and forth on how messed up it was, whether or not the prisoner deserved to be killed given what his jihadist buddies were doing. I mean, they were taking slaves, bringing back legit open-air slave markets with weeping and wailing women and girls, not to mention killing literally hundreds of innocent people in these mass executions out in the deserts. But in the end, I suppose it didn't matter a jot what we thought about it because, as we're talking, my mate shares a post with one of the shocked, appalled emoji things. You know, the ones that are yellow but also kind of blue? It was a photograph. A photo of the same prisoner whose picture had been posted just a few hours previously. He was lying in the dusty dirt with this vacant look on his face, with a puddle of blood pooling under his body. They'd done it. They'd killed him. on the orders of the general Instagram using public. It sent a chill through me. I mean, like I said, I've no doubt that the guy deserved what he got, but knowing it was done in such a savage way, put to a vote, then when passed, even the people who were supposedly the good guys could prove to just be as bloodthirsty and merciless as the monsters they were fighting. We can't really judge either. The Kurds were being exterminated out there. How would you react if your people were being murdered or sold into slavery? You'd want to fight back too, and ferociously at that. The posts were taken down and the account was banned not long after, thankfully. Obviously, Instagram couldn't have something like that on their platform, but as quickly as the admins would delete an account, a brand new one would pop up and post the same images and votes. It didn't just happen one time. I saw execution votes just like the first one I'd seen, posted time and time again. I don't think I've ever looked at people in quite the same way since. Like, I know all that stuff was half a world away, but I think we can all agree that at their core, people are the same all over. We can be kind, generous, compassionate, but we all have it in us to be cold, bloodthirsty, and monstrous too. A few years ago, I started getting into this Italian crime show called Gomorrah. I must have watched every series of The Sopranos like a zillion times, and a friend of mine recommended Gomorrah to me, selling it to me as being like the Italian Sopranos, only 100 times more brutal and bleak. And needless to say, I was hooked, and I binge-watched the first 2 series in like a week, usually with my phone nearby so I could text my buddy like, "Oh God, this show's so amazing," every so often, and thanking him to turning me on to it. Then not long after, I'm scrolling through Instagram and I notice I'm getting Italian language sponsored ads. I figured it was just a glitch in the app's algorithm, something like that, and didn't think anything of it. But it kept happening, over and over again. I get all kinds of ads for different products and services that were only available in Italy. I'm a little embarrassed that it took me as long as it did to make the connection between the Italian advertisements and the fact that I've been watching Gomorrah. But when I finally did, it seriously gave me the creeps. My phone was listening to me. My phone had been broadcasting the sound of the TV series to somewhere that was then tailoring the promoted posts in my Insta feed to stuff it was assumed that I might buy. But then if it was listening to me and sending whatever I was saying off to some advertising company or whatever, there's legit nothing to say that the government can't access with that same technology. For years we worried about the possibility of George Orwell's 1984 becoming a reality, fretting over a totalitarian government that would put cameras or microphones in our homes that they could then use to listen to us. But do you think Orwell could have predicted that we'd do it all voluntarily? That all you had to do was package the telescreen in a tiny, shiny package, couple it with social media, and we'd basically hand over our collective privacy on a silver platter. Like, I might sound legit crazy 20 or 30 years ago if I was all like, they're listening to us, they're spying on us on our phones. But today, it's a matter of record that our devices record ambient noises before analyzing it and passing on keywords to advertisers. And it's not even the fact that it's happening that's the scary part. It's the fact that no one really cares. No one really gives a hoot that we have next to no privacy anymore. I've even heard people talk about Huawei phones like, I don't care if the Chinese have all my info. What are they going to do with it? Now I use VPNs on almost every device I own these days, and I don't own a smartphone anymore. Just a flip phone that I can turn off whenever I'm not using it. I don't think I'd actually use voicemail in about a decade, but now I use it all the time. I just find it extremely creepy that we just sleepwalked into this state of affairs without any more thought than, ooh, my phone now has a camera, or ooh, now my phone has the internet. I used to think those conspiracy theory types were just a bunch of loons, but if they were right about our phones, what else are they right about? Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let'sReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, 2021 is your year.